Okay, everybody, buckle up. It's time to go through the middle colonies. The middle colonies just includes New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Gorgeous. Let's talk about the geography. You'll put this on the geography section of your middle colonies carriage ride note-taking sheet. Glaciers from the north brought lots of really good soil from New England down to the middle colonies. That's why there was so much farming going on in that area. And because they were farther south, the growing season was a lot longer. So there was a lot more sunlight and rain. This made it a perfect place for farming. Farmers had a great way to transport their goods to the markets where the crops were all sold and the supplies were purchased. This method of transportation was traveling along wide rivers like the Delaware and the Hudson. They also had a lot of access to their wildlife. They took advantage of this, and many of the animals were hunted and they were trapped. This is the Delaware River during the winter. This is what farming in the middle colonies looked like. This is a photo of what the home life might look like in the middle colonies. And this is a drawing of New Amsterdam, which was later called New York. And this is one of the ports you can see during the middle colonies that they used to transport all of the goods by water. This is New Amsterdam in 1660, also known as New York. Okay, get your sheet out now and write a few things about the geography. Okay, let's go on and take some notes about history. Society in the middle colonies was a lot more varied than it was in the New England colonies. They were a lot more tolerant of the people that lived there. And in a lot of ways, Pennsylvania and Delaware owed all their successes to William Penn. Get it? William Penn, Pennsylvania. Under his guidance, Pennsylvania functioned smoothly and its population grew. By 1685, they had 9,000 people living there. The heart of the colony was Philadelphia. This was a city to be known for its really broad and tree-shaded streets. They had brick and stone houses and tons of busy docks, and by the end of the colonial period, there were 30,000 people living there, and they were from all over the place. They represented many languages, creeds, trades, and their talent for successful business enterprise made the city one of the thriving centers of colonial America. Though the Quakers dominated in Philadelphia, elsewhere in Pennsylvania, others were represented. There were a lot of Germans. They were the most skillful farmers, and there were other industries that were very important too, like weaving, shoemaking, cabinet making, and other kinds of crafts like that. They were definitely DIYers. Pennsylvania also was the principal gateway into the New World for the Scottish/Irish people who moved into the colony in the early 18th century. Bold, very poor strangers, as one Pennsylvania official called them, they hated the English, and they were suspicious of all governments. The Scots-Irish, they settled in the back country, where they cleared the land, and they lived by hunting and farming. As mixed as the people were in Pennsylvania, New York best illustrated the polyglot nature of America. Everybody lived together in New York. By 1646, the population along the Hudson River included Dutch people, French people, Danes, Norwegians, Swedish people, English people, the Scots, the Irish, the Germans, Polish people, Bohemians, Portuguese, and Italians. Everywhere. And those were just the forerunners of millions more to come. The Dutch continued to exercise a huge social and economic influence on New York all along the British colonial system. Their sharp-stepped gable roofs made a permanent part of the city's architecture, and their merchants gave Manhattan much of its original bustling and commercial atmosphere. It was a busy, busy place thanks to the Dutch. Okay, this is about Penn's treaty with the Indians. According to the legend, the Native Americans met William Penn under an elm tree, the site where Penn Treaty Park is now, just north of Penn's Landing. The encounter, this meeting here, included words of friendship and maybe the purchase of land. While such a great treaty meeting never really occurred, it did symbolize the desire for peace on both the part of the Delaware and Lenape Indians and William Penn. Here you see the birth of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania and Delaware, back in England, a young man from an important family decided to become a Quaker, and his name was William Penn. And Quakers weren't popular in England or America, and Penn was put in prison several times because he was a Quaker. But his father was rich and he was powerful, and the king owed him a lot of money. So when Penn's father died, William suggested that the king could give him land in America as repayment for the debt that he owed his dad. The king agreed, and Penn wanted to create a safe place for Quakers to go and worship. So in 1681, he began planning his new colony, which he named, you guessed it, Pennsylvania. Quakers are very peaceful people, and it was important to Penn that his colony be on good terms with all of its neighbors. So even though his charter made him the sole owner or proprietor and of all the land, Penn made an agreement with the Lenape Indians to buy territory from them. He also purchased, maybe he leased it, the land where he built Philadelphia from the Swedish. He didn't want his colony to be landlocked, so he asked the Duke of York if he could have the lower counties that align the Delaware River. Duke granted his request, but Penn quickly realized that that area that he just bought was culturally and linguistically different from the rest of Pennsylvania. People were different there. So in 1701, he granted the region a separate colonial assembly, and they called it Delaware. That's how Delaware became Delaware, because of William Penn. Despite Penn's desire to be in harmony with everyone, the owner of Maryland disputed his border with Pennsylvania, so there's always fights over land. And this argument lasted more than a century when royal surveyors Charles Mason and Jeremiah Dixon worked for 4 years to establish the borderline. This became known as the Mason-Dixon line. It was the thing that represented the cultural divide between the North and the South. Okay, now it's time to get your paper out and write a few notes in the history section of your note-taking sheet. Don't forget to include information I told you about William Penn and Delaware. Let's talk about the economy. So, how was the Middle Colony different than the New England colonies? The main economic activity in the Middle Colony was farming, and unlike the New England colonies, the Middle colonies grew cash crops. This was wheat and corn and other grains. These were their exports. This is what they sent away to get money. And many of the farms in the Middle colonies were single-family farms, ranging from anywhere from 50 to 150 acres. And since the colonies had good farmland, they could produce a lot of crops. So they would sell the extras and keep the money for themselves. And similar to the southern colonies, which you'll find out later, farming was a fairly large portion of their economy. But it wasn't the only thing they did. There was a lot of small industries. They sold things such as tea and hats and books, and all of these items were imported from England. What you're looking at here is an indenture contract signed with an X by Henry Mayer in 1737. He was a slave that agreed to work for free for a certain amount of time so that he can become freed. Although farming was a huge part of their economy, there were other ways to make a career other than being a farmer too, though. There's tailors, glass blowers, silversmiths, blacksmiths. There were also these indentured servants like Henry Mayer. Unlike the southern colonies, the middle colonies had more indentured servants than slaves to work for them. Indentured servants were different because they would work for a certain period of time for free without pay in exchange for passage to the colonies, where they would then become free. Another major part of their economy was bread. The middle colonies were known as the breadbasket because of how much bread they ate and they produced. The average person in the middle colonies ate about 1 pound of bread a day. The bread was produced in mills like this one, which were powered by waterfalls on the fall line that crushed the grains for the bread. And the fall line is a line of waterfalls near the eastern part of America. And since the middle colonies were on the fall line, they had the ability to crush all of the grains they grew so that they could turn it into bread. Pretty cool. Get your sheet out again, go to the economy part, and write in the ways that people made money. Don't just say farming. There were other ways that people did. Go back and listen if you have to. Okay, at this point, you want to take your notes, go to write about, and create a summary of what you've learned about the middle colonies. In your summary, include which states made up the middle colonies, what you know about William Penn and how he created Delaware and Pennsylvania, what you know about New York, and how they made their money in the economy. And don't forget to add what you know about the geography and the soil and what that was good for. Don't forget to give it a name. Thanks. Bye.